Peace, happy family. I hope everyone's doing well tonight. All right, we're just going to get right into this one because this is a good one. HAPI Talks presents Dr. Patricia Newton. I love this woman. Let me tell you, she is the author of the Posttraumatic Slave Disorder book. She's a behavioral scientist and a psychiatrist. This woman's bio is so long, and we have a lot to talk about. So I'm just going to go ahead and bring her in. Hey, hey, Dr. Newton, how you doing?
Hey, how you doing, Miss Felicia?
That's good. All right, you're looking good over there in Baltimore.
Oh, well, doing okay for an old lady.
You know, you keep throwing around this old lady, but you are like the most busiest old lady I know.
Yeah. Keeps me out of trouble, you know?
That's a good one. That's good then. All right, so just go and tell us a little bit about yourself before we get started.
Well, I am a medical doctor who's a psychiatrist, and I'm practicing between Baltimore, and I'm also the CEO and medical director for the Black Psychiatrists of America, which is the premier psychiatric organization of Black psychiatrists across the United States and the diaspora, as well as the Caribbean and in Africa. And I've been practicing for longer than probably you are old.
Oh no, I'm almost a half a century this year.
Well, I've been practicing almost that long, not quite, but almost. And my area of expertise has been for years in substance use disorders as well as in trauma, and as well as most of the anxiety disorders. Do a lot of work internationally in Africa, the Caribbean, as well as some parts of Europe and South America. I am doing my best to live my best life at my age and empowering my people to begin to have more positive influences about themselves, their outlook, and the future for our children.
You know, we could just end it right there. That is beautiful. God, that's beautiful. So, so let's start with this. Like, how did you get into psychiatry?
Well, that was not where I started. When I went to medical school, I was going to be one of these dynamic women surgeons, and I had gotten accepted as an intern, a surgical intern. But my senior year of medical school, I went to Washington University Medical School in St. Louis, and I did electives my entire senior year because the best thing to my eyes was the rear view mirror, was the arch in my rear view mirror of my car. So I got out of St. Louis as much as I could on my senior year, and I did an elective in Washington, D.C. at the NIMH. But prior to that, as a senior in medical school, I had been president of the Student National Medical Association, and we had brought in somebody named Dr. Alice Galati, who was a psychiatrist over at Howard. First Black woman psychiatrist I'd ever met, powerful woman. And later on, when I did that elective at the National Institutes of Mental Health, I was able to get to DC. She was at Howard to hang out with her. And I had just finished reading somebody that later became extremely famous, and that was Dr. Frances Welsing's first book, not the ISIS papers, but the one before that, The Keys to the Colors.
Yes.
And I had said to Dr. Galati, do you know this lady? She said, sure, you know. And apparently she was Dr. Welsing's mentor. So she introduced me, and I went to see her. Thought it was going to be about 30 minutes. It ended up being almost 3 hours that I talked to her.
Wow.
And when I was leaving, she said, oh, I know we're going to see you in psychiatry next year. I said, oh, no, I'm going to be a surgeon. She said, oh, no, my dear, you're a thinker, not a cutter. And so that's history. And so those two women, Dr. Galati and Dr. Welsing, kind of put me under their wings. And so I did my internship and then went on into psychiatry like any sane person would do, right? And from that point on, you know, we worked together with Dr. Welsing through the melanin conferences that we did for years. And so it became almost second nature to have she and Dr. Galati to be giving me guidance. And unfortunately, Dr. Galati made her transition on April the 30th due to COVID, and Dr. Welsing made her transition in 2016. So both of them, you know, I celebrate those ladies, and they and on both of their shoulders I stand.
Oh, Ashe. That's beautiful. Oh. You know, it's so important. You know, we were talking earlier. It's so important, you know, that you're still here, because without you, you know, we don't have anyone's shoulders to stand on. So I'm so happy, you know, that you are continuing, that you're staying busy, and that you're, you know, doing the work. That's what's up. Um,
Well,
how,
thank you so
oh,
much.
you're welcome. And are you working with students now?
Not students, but residents and young career psychiatrists.
Oh,
Primarily, we have some young ones coming along that are dynamite, and you'll be hearing a lot from them. They're going to be making some waves, and so I kind of have a couple of
oh,
younger that are under my wing that they're going to be making waves. Don't worry.
wow. Such a beautiful wing to be under, I tell you. Yeah,
Well, as long as it's still flying, okay.
you know what? Let me tell you, you are not slowing down. You are not slowing down. All right, so let's just jump right into it. So the post-traumatic slave disorder, what
Hmm.
is it, and how does it differ from the syndrome?
Well, first of all, a syndrome is a medical term for a cluster of symptoms that manifest themselves and then get locked into one kind of manifestation. A disorder, however, is something entirely different. It's a disruption, it's chaos, it's confusion. And so the reason that I created the term, and Professor Smalls is, by the way, and I were working on this years ago together, Professor James Smalls, and because what we see experiencing, our people experiencing and are expressing, is something beyond a syndrome. We are confused, we are disoriented, we have been living in chaos. Trauma is an integral part of that chaos, both from an epigenetic level as well as then and now. And so it was a descriptive term of what I was seeing among my patients, my people, my friends, my family, that kind of thing. And so it's been around now. You know, they use the terms interchangeably, but they're not quite the same. What I'm talking about is more expansive. You know, the disruption of a people, of a system, and an organized system of living, you know, is what happened to us as part of the Ma'afa.
Mm. And so, how does this like show up in our lives? And wait, before I ask that, is this like different from, because I know a lot of people talk about battle fatigue syndrome, and you know, is that like the same thing, or is it like part of it? More.
Well, when they talk about battle fatigue syndrome, they're talking about post-traumatic stress disorder,
Okay.
which has a result of trauma. And yes, there are components of the PTSD under the PTSLD, under the
Okay.
post-traumatic slavery disorder.
Okay.
And but the issue for us as a people is that our trauma has never stopped. From the times we were kidnapped, literally kidnapped, from the shores of Africa and brought to the Americas, the Caribbean, Europe. You know, we have been under constant assault as a people. We are continuing to be under constant assault. And so now we have a new science called epigenetics, where we actually are able to see
Mhm.
7 generations forward the effects that trauma has had on the manifestation and expression of genes. It's not an actual change in the DNA of a people.
Mhm.
It's actually something that switches on and switches off. It changes the expression of that particular gene. And so when you ask the question, how is it manifesting itself? All you got to do is look out your door, look around the
Mhm.
corner, look at how our people are continually being treated. Look at in the face of COVID-19, the disparities in healthcare among Black and Brown people. So we have a lot of the effects of trauma that occurred then and is continuing now. And this has tremendous effect upon the nature and quality of our social interactions, our relationships with ourselves, our relationships with our significant others, our relationships with the world in general.
So having, with all of this going on, okay, and this is, you laid it out. What, like, how do we get up every day and keep going? Like, what is it that we can do?
Well, we get up every day and keep going because that's the stuff we're made of, and
Mhm.
that's what our ancestors did, and that's what we continue to do because our will to live and survive and ultimately thrive is greater than our will to die, despite the fact that because of these traumas, the things that have happened to us have created in some people behaviors that are not necessarily consistent with life. They're not necessarily consistent with health, and they're not necessarily consistent with general well-being. But despite all of that, we are a strong people. We've been here since the beginning of time. Everybody else is a variation on our theme, and so as a result of that, I think that we have somehow learned how to adjust and just move on with the flow. But it's not without its battle scars. And so we sit here, you and I, having this discussion using technology, but at what price have our people paid for us to even be engaging in this intellectual discourse? And what that price has been is a tremendous amount of stress that has created an imbalance within our systems that help keep our immune systems constantly being challenged because stress lowers your immune system,
Mhm.
and that's before COVID-19. Stress interferes with the nature of the relationships that we have within our families. Stress causes inflammation in the physical body that creates these chronic conditions associated with asthma, associated with cancer, associated with diabetes, associated with some mental disorders. And so, despite all of that, as the saying goes, we are still standing. We wobbling, but we still standing.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what are some things that we like? I guess what I'm trying to get at is like, what are some things that we can do? Um, you know, or is there something that you've seen that's working and maybe like one area of the world and that we need to adopt and to help us here?
What I think that the great thing about us as Africans in the Americas is that we are an amalgamation of a lot of things.
Mhm.
We're not the African that got on that boat for sure. The African that got
Mhm.
on that boat is not the one that got off that boat. And the nature of our relationships have changed because we have been following a pattern that one's oppressor has created, and it's not a pattern that is consistent with our emotional, spiritual, and even physical well-being. So what am I saying? I'm saying the first thing that we have to come to grips with is acknowledge the fact that we are wounded. We are a wounded people, but with that wound, we can heal. And how do we heal? We heal by looking at some of the old ways that came with us, from the South, or some of our grandparents used to say things that these sayings and things that were truisms that if we listen to them, they were really good models, of life. You remember there's an expression, be careful what you pray for, you just might get it. And so part of the issue for us is to look at who we are. I think what would help us in terms of our relationships with each other, whether they be intimate, platonic, or just general social relationships, is to first come to terms with the fact that we have to love ourselves. Despite
Mhm.
all this negative stuff that you hear in the environment, self love is the first process. It's the first level of actualization. When I can love myself, then and only then can I love you, because what is going on is I might say, oh, I love you, but it's counterfeit. Because if I am treating myself in a very negative and hostile way, there's no way I can love you and express that love to you. I'm just giving you, perfunctory actions. And so loving yourself,
Mhm.
having the ability to laugh at yourself when you screw up, that's a critical piece. Knowing your history, it is going to be a critical piece to know who you are and to understand that from our historical perspective, in terms of our well-being and our healing and our male and female relationships, is that men are not women, women are not men, but we are complementary. And that complementarity is what has sustained African people, because we need both energies. We need the masculine energy, we need the feminine energy, we need a balance, and we need homeostasis. And so, what that implies is that going back to our roots, having our Sankofa moments, go back and get our history so we can move forward. Stop denying the fact that we are African. We are African, and Africans on the continent need to understand that those of us in the diaspora are just as African as they are. Africans in the Americas need to stop denying the fact that they are African, and we need to begin to work together collectively as a people. And when we do that, we can rebuild communities, we can rebuild families, we can rebuild the nature of our relationships in a positive, productive, and healthy way. To the degree that we allow other people to come in and make our definitions, to come in and define how we should even interact with each other, and to come in to create confusion amongst us, keeps us in a state of disorder, chaos, of what I call the post-traumatic slavery or enslavement disorder, because we know better. And inside of our bodies, there becomes this war. So we have this cognitive dissonance where it feels wrong. We know what to do. It just feels wrong because everything in our environment tells us that who we are does not count. And we have to validate ourselves. The Creator made us, our people, first. And we must understand that we have divine inheritance. And that inheritance requires us to take stock of who we are, to love ourselves, to be kinder and gentler to our neighbors, and to begin to defend and protect our children.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So there was something you said early on when you were talking about, you said men, men have to be men and women need to be women. So
Right.
can you talk a little bit about that more? Um,
Well, in African systems, uh, there are roles. No one is superior. We live in a Western world where masculinity is dominant and femininity is supposed to be recessive.
mhm,
Uh, in systems where harmony and balance exist, number one, then each person has their role to play to make the system work. In other words, if I am a wheel, if you are a wheel,
mhm,
you have spokes coming from different directions, but they all come to the center to make that wheel move forward. So, what I am implying is that nothing is better or worse. There are roles. Men cannot have children, although there have been implants that are going on now. But you understand what I'm saying. I'm saying that
yeah.
there is energy that has to be balanced. There's masculine energy, there's feminine energy. Everybody has a little bit of both. But in the dynamic of making a society work, they must begin to complement each other. They must begin to have roles that are clearly defined and not confused in order for
Mhm.
the system to not be in chaos. That's what I'm saying. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. Yeah. No, definitely. So when you're talking about, okay, so, if hopefully if men know who they are and women know who they are, they come together. um how does, with everything that's going on in the world, how does this like impact like black relationships?
Well, Black relationships have always, well, not always, since Africans came to these shores, let me be correct.
Okay.
There has always been an attempt to destroy the nature of Black male-female relationships. There's always been an attempt to impact negatively on Black family systems. And so, as long as you know that, you can begin to start insulating yourself and your family. That means that we don't have to really like each other in community, but we have to have common goals. And those common goals are going to be for the continuation first of the species. That's why we need to have children. And secondly, for the protection of those children. And
Mhm.
thirdly, for the empowerment for us to have control of our own destiny. And so we are in a situation, most African people throughout the world are in a situation where someone else is pulling the puppet strings. And all we must do is cut them. We have to cut
Mhm.
those strings so that we can begin to understand that one, we don't need to continue to be dependent on our enemies. And two, that we
Mhm.
must begin to insulate ourselves, and that we have to begin to have educate our children not only in the mass school system, in the system that is out in the public, but like other groups, it is critical for us to begin to have some alternative schools, some evening schools, some weekend schools where we learn about our culture. Because one of the things that we do know, and the statistics do prove it out, that when children know who they are, I'm talking about African children, know who they are least likely to enter into the juvenile justice system.
Mhm.
They are least likely to enter into the criminal justice system. And we have to begin to look at that as an insulating mechanism, as a primary prevention mechanism, if we were to look at a healthcare model of keeping our children out of this system. Now, once they're in it, of course, our job is to rehabilitate them, but we need to do everything we can to keep our children outside of that criminal justice system, number one. Number two, we have to go back to policing our own communities. You
Mhm.
cannot go in other folks' communities, as was evidenced by the young brother that was just jogging in Georgia and got killed for no reason, and even walk around. But we let anything and everybody come in our communities, and we say nothing, and that exposes our children to a great deal of trauma. Then we have to also recognize the fact that because many parents have been traumatized,
Mhm.
they then re-traumatize their own children. And as a result of that, we have what we call these adverse childhood experiences that then we know create stress and keep situations so that people end up with chronic medical conditions as well as psychiatric conditions and substance use and alcoholism disorders. And so what I'm saying is that we have to stop abusing our children. And if you were abused yourself, then you need to go get professional help, because we don't need to continue this cycle. And with this intimate partner violence that we see within families, uh, is related to a lot of early trauma,
Mhm.
substance use disorders, and people feeling disenfranchised to the degree that they go out and hurt and strike the ones that they're closest to and the ones that love them the most.
Yeah. So, going back to self first, um, when you talked about self love, is that something that people are taught, or is it just something that your environment teaches you, or is it something you're just born with, like your level of self love?
No, you're born with it, but you get deprogrammed away from it because of the way the society is. And so, what's important is that we have to begin to buffer our children, and we have to begin to address the fact that every human on the face of this earth is divinely created. They have a divine mission, whether they know what that is or not. In ancient Africa, they used to tell you that the only way to know God was to study man. And so we are supposed to be the accurate reflection despite our behavior. But unfortunately, God gave us free will, or the Creator gave us free will. And some of us don't quite know what to do with all of that. And so, what's important in terms of self love is that learning and teaching and providing nurturance to children, allow them the opportunity to make a mistake and it be okay. And
Mm-hmm.
teaching them, have these teachable moments so that our children do not grow up thinking, in fact, that they are less than. I have a book coming out next month
Yeah.
called Smart Sisters and Brothers Ain't Finishing Last. Um, and it's to talk about how to achieve not only self-love but self-appreciation and self-discipline in 16 achievable steps. And so I'll let you guys know about that. But one of the things that is important is that providing nurturance to children is the greatest buffer that anybody can have in terms of prevention of sickness, prevention of mental disorders, prevention of incarceration, and prevention of a number of behaviors like drug and alcohol abuse that 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 manifest themselves in our people. So you learn, you're born with the capacity, but it has to be nurtured, just like you plant a seed and you have to water it and feed it and have sunlight with it. That's what you have to do for us. Our children are little seeds and they have to germinate. And when they germinate, they have to be protected and they have to be nurtured and they have to be given the proper environmental
Mm-hmm.
nutrients in order to be able to grow into this beautiful flower or this beautiful plant. And so we have that capability despite what has happened to us. And that's why it's important for like minds to get together. And so when you are in these relationships that are toxic, it's very difficult to provide a healthy environment for your children. And people say, oh, I will stay in this relationship for the sake of my children. No, if it's toxic, you need to get the what out of there for the sake of your children and yourself.
Mm. Mm. Okay, so before you can even get to the relationship or even have kids, um, you gotta work on yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You can't bring counterfeit to the table and expect the real
Mm.
deal.
Yes. Wow. Is this in your book too? You gotta put all this in your book. Wow. So just starting with yourself, what are things that, like, that someone who doesn't have kids, is not in a relationship, like what are some things they can just start to do to develop their self-love, if it wasn't, like if they didn't get it, when they were a kid, if
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so at this point, like maybe they're in their 20s or 30s or maybe even 50s,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't have
Mm-hmm.
self-love, like what do they do? What are
Well,
things
there are a number of things. A lot of times people have good relationships with friends. They have social circles and social networks that are positive and give them nurturance. If they're totally dysfunctional, they need professional help.
Mm,
They need to call somebody like me or some of my colleagues or whatever, a good counselor to help them get back on track. But the most important thing is to first recognize that no matter what has happened to you, no matter what kinds of uh, vicissitudes and adversities that you've encountered, the Creator put you here for a reason. And you
mm,
are here to fulfill that divine purpose. Your job is to find out what it is. And so understand that whatever has happened, that's what's done to you. That is not who you are. So, who you are and what you do or what has happened to you are not the same. Understand that you come here with a divine purpose, and two, go out and fulfill that mission. How do we fulfill that mission? First of all, take your inventory of yourself. What are the things that I want to change? Not because somebody else is telling me to change them, but because I feel that there are things that I need to work on for myself. Stop depending on someone outside of yourself to fulfill whatever gaps that you think
mm,
you may need. In relationships, I find that a lot of people will go get somebody who they think can meet their needs. No, that's not how relationships work. You don't meet each other, your needs for the other person. You accentuate the, the relationship of the needs that you already have and that have met. You just accentuate. Relationships are to embellish, not to substitute. And
Mm.
so
Okay.
part of the issue is to make sure that you are being honest with yourself. And whatever things you need to change, change them. But change them because of what you want to do. And how do you learn to know what you want to do? That's where meditation and prayer and having these conversations with your ancestors, help you to get clarity on things. Because if you're constantly dependent on what media says or social media, and where there's a lot of misinformation and fake news, to validate you, then you've already started out with a problem. So
Yeah.
listen to your gut and not your head. Your gut will tell you when something is wrong. When something is not going to work, you'll get this uneasy feeling in your stomach. That's your autonomic nervous system. It's telling you, wait a minute, because that's the system that relates to the old fight flight mechanism. You either stand to do battle or you haul behind. And so, whatever it is, even if you don't quite know what it is, if your stomach starts to feel uncomfortable, just back away. You don't have to go rushing in like a
Yeah.
bull, coming out of the corral. You back away, you process, you get more data, and you begin to validate. Go deal with people that you respect and that you like, who are true friends or true mentors. I hate to use that word, but true, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
to your listening audience. Because they will not lie to you. They will tell you, look, A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, X, Y, and Z. And then you, as an
Mhm.
intelligent human being, can process what they're saying. Work on one thing at a time. Find one thing that you may want to change about yourself. Now, if you're getting a lot of brownie points for being a drama king or a queen, it's going to be hard for you to change unless you're confronted with something, because you're getting too much validation
Yeah.
from doing all that drama. And so that may take a minute. You may have to really have a traumatic, major conscious traumatic event to change that. But some people, are toxic, and you need to remove them from your life. And they're toxic because your gut tells you they're toxic.
Yeah.
There's an old saying that everybody lights up a room. Some people when they enter it, others when they leave. And so, you may need to leave that darkness, that toxicity out of your life. So get rid of your toxic people, your toxic places, and your toxic things. And that will give you, first of all, a great joy, and that will put you in move you very exponentially into self-love.
Yeah. Okay. You said a bunch. You said a lot of stuff. Okay. But one of the things you said about, know that you're here for a divine purpose. I can just imagine, like, if, kids growing up and, that's the only thing you keep hearing, that you're here to to fulfill a divine purpose. That is a straight game changer.
It is.
Yeah, it's like,
It is.
at this point I can do anything. It's like I know that I'm God and I can do anything. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? I'm, like that. Oh, that's beautiful. Um, Embellish and don't substitute. That's good too.
Yeah. Right.
I hope these things are in your book. Okay.
They are. Some
Okay.
they
Good.
are. They are.
So
They are.
you said something like about sometimes you can get to a point where you may need professional help. So
Right.
how do we deal with the stigma that's attached to going to get professional help? Or is there actually a stigma attached to getting professional help, like for mental disorders or mental problems?
Yes, there is a stigma,
Okay.
and that stigma is profound, and it even exists on the continent as well.
Mhm.
Um, but we have to understand that if you can go to the doctor to get your diabetes checked, your blood pressure checked, your heart disease checked, you can go to the doctor
Yeah.
and get your emotional well-being checkup as well. We at the Black Psychiatrists call it getting your checkup from the neck up. And so you have to come to the realization that if things are not working, if you are feeling constantly depressed, constantly
Mhm.
stressed, constantly anxious, feel like nothing you do is working, then you need to talk to somebody. Some people go to their ministers. We do have ministers or counselors. Some people need more than that. Some people need to have really serious medical evaluation, because some people are having depression because they have other illnesses, cancer, and all these other things can start out with depression. Some people are having emotional maladjustment. Some people are out of touch with reality. It's hard when you are psychotic to get the help, because you
Yeah.
don't think anything is wrong with you. You think something is wrong with everybody else. But yes, there is a stigma, and we've been working at the Black Psychiatrists of America with the many of the churches. We have a faith-based outreach program where we are actually training clergy in advocacy, as well as dealing with their own mental illnesses and their own stress. And under COVID-19, it's going to be a lot more of post-traumatic stress disorder, in addition to the acute stress that we're under. Despite, even if the virus flattens out, people's emotional systems are not going to flatten out just like that. And so part of what we have to understand is that it is not a sign of weakness to realize that you may need some professional counseling. Now, part of that issue is whether that counseling is truly culturally competent. And so that's going to be important. But if you're in a crisis, it don't matter what the culture is, go get you some help. But having said that, understand with the realization that these may be medical illnesses. This is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of stupidity to not get help when you need it.
Yeah. I think you said, like your circle of friends. Let me tell you, and this is for everyone that's listening, because what you said is it's on the money. A couple of years ago, I was diagnosed with cancer, breast cancer. And, and I have really good friends who are like the kind that they'll tell you A, B, C, D, E, F, G, but they'll even go into double letters. Okay. Those are the type of friends I have. And I remember, right before I had to get surgery and all this stuff, and I was like, I'm fine. I thought I was fine and everything. And my oncologist, who was Black, she, had a conversation with me. And she told me, you should just go and talk to somebody before the surgery. I was like, why? Like, I'm good. Like, I already know my plan. I'm gonna do this, and that. But let me tell you, because she is a Black woman, and she's, I have all this like utmost respect for Black women who are, like yourself, who are, out here making sure that we're okay. And so I was like, let me go and check this out. This is going to be easy. I sat down with this woman. I talked maybe 20 minutes. I was in straight tears. I didn't even know that I was stressed about this. But, then, that's probably, that's why I got cancer, because I was stressed. But it's like, I didn't even, sitting down with her, and she just took me, and she was gentle, and she was asking questions, and I started talking. And the more and more I talked, it was like I was able to get it all out. And I didn't think anything was wrong.
Well, denial is a powerful defense mechanism.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it only lasts for so long, because sooner
Yeah.
or later reality comes and slams dunks you in the face.
Yeah. Yeah. And yep. Yes. Yes. Yes.
And let me add to that. When we're talking about getting help, I see a lot of resistance with couples who may be in trouble, and they will not go and seek counseling. It can be the male side or it can be the female side. I've seen it both ways. They just will not address it, as though somehow that's an admission of weakness and failure. Listen, all of us have skills. None of us know everything. And most of us know very little about negotiating in relationships. We learn how to tie our shoes. We learn how to brush our teeth. We learn how to wipe our butts, but we don't learn how to take care of our emotions. And so if you don't know how to do that, go and get some help. You get help learning how to do everything else, how to drive a car, how to ride a bike. You mean to tell me you can't go and get some help for how to save your emotional well-being so you can get on with your life and have quality? That's what I'm saying. We have to destigmatize this. And it comes back for our people. It comes back to the distrust of the healthcare system
Yeah.
because of the things like the Tuskegee experiment and other, various and sundry things where we know that we've been on the short end of the stick as a people. But there are people out there, there are counselors out there, there are social workers, there are psychologists, there are psychiatrists like myself, there are pastoral counselors who can offer you assistance. But it's mostly going to be up to the person.
Mm-hmm.
And mental attitude is going to be the major thing that heals you from physical illness,
Yes.
from
Yes.
emotional illness, and
Yeah.
from all that pain and suffering that you have in
Mm-hmm.
relationships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh gosh. So in terms of I guess when you're talking about creating or being in a space where you can seek help. I know you mentioned that you're part of the American Society. Say
The
it.
Black Psychiatrists of America.
Yeah, is it, so that's a place that we can go and get and at least get. I mean, like, do you guys have like a list of like psychiatrists and stuff like that? That we can
Yeah,
have access to.
right. What happens is you call us and we will find out what city you're in. And if we
Okay.
have members there, we will refer you there. If we don't have members, we will see if someone who lives in that area is available and is seeing patients. Yes, that's true. And we're on the web, so that's not an issue. But there are many other. There's the Association of Black Psychologists.
Okay.
There's the Association of Black Social Workers. There's Association of Black Nurses who have psychiatric nurse practitioners. There
Okay.
are a whole host. There's a Pastoral Counselors Association. So you've got a host of people available that can help you. Uh, if you are willing to avail yourself. And sometimes, just like it is with a regular uh, physical physician or counselor, there may not be a goodness of fit. Just because that one doctor and you
Mhm.
did not get along, or you didn't have or you had a personality clash, doesn't mean that everybody is like that. We've
Yeah.
all changed primary care doctors and all of that. We may
Mhm.
not like the way somebody has treated us in a hospital, so we don't go back. We'll go somewhere else. So that's the same
Yeah.
thing with when you are looking for someone to handle your emotional well-being. There has to be a goodness of fit, and not every and no one size fits all. And so, I'm just saying that, in some instances you may have to go and see two or three different kind of people,
Mhm.
rather than just making a decision to that, it didn't work with this one person, and so therefore I'm just not going back.
Yeah.
Because it's your life.
Yeah.
It's your life, and you have to be willing to deal with your life.
Yeah. Yes. So, in terms of the post-traumatic slave disorder and men and women, is there a difference between how we're handling it?
Well, I think men may be in more denial.
Okay.
Women are in denial, but I think men may be in more denial. And what we see them manifested more in the substance use disorders, in alcoholism, and the drug
Mhm.
abuse. We
Okay.
see it sometimes in the explosive personalities. We see it in the increase now in young people, in suicide among males. Young Black males is off the chain. We see it
Mhm.
in homicide and acting out behaviors. With women, we may see it more in anxiety and in
Mhm.
depression. I mean, there's no cut and dry for either one, but that's how we begin to manifest it. Because have seen a lot of people coming in for substance use disorders, and what happens is that when you go to it, they really do have depression. They
Mhm.
have depression, and it's not been recognized. So, with men, and so it manifests itself differently, but when the core symptoms are almost all the same.
Mhm. Um, do you feel like the disorder in any type of way uh, is impacted by like how people may be exploited, you know, in terms of like racism? I guess.
Well, racism is a
I mean,
factor. Racism is one of the biggest stresses around,
mhm.
and it causes a lot of the stress and and the distress that creates these other conditions, not only mental conditions but physical conditions, and some of the behaviors that we see in people that are aberrant. So yeah, we cannot ignore the fact that racism is a major factor in affecting the health and general well-being of a large number of people throughout the world, not just in the United States.
Mm. So, like in your practice in terms of like men and women, when you were saying that it's hard for them to even just get in the door, when they do get in the door, what are some common problems, that you're seeing that they're experiencing?
Well, it's the ones I alluded to before. It's a lot of drug and alcohol abuse. It's
Okay.
a lot of physical family violence and a intimate partner violence, lots of depression and anxiety um, that may manifest itself in the form of irritable bowel syndrome, may
Mm.
manifest itself in the form of cardiac arrhythmias. So we see a lot of physical illnesses that have their underlying manifestations being emotional and psychiatric disorders. Yes, we do.
Mm. And you talk about the kids and like the education system. Um,
You mean the miseducation system?
yes, yes, the miseducation system. But I'm just sitting here thinking about like if I, if I'm a person who is already, like you said, stressed by, what's happening out here, and then you're also afraid, for all the things that, like we talked about, Ahmaud Arbery, those type of things. Like, how do you not like put that on your kids? Like, how do you, keep them, in a space where they feel like they can do anything, but yet we're in a world where sometimes it feels like we can't do anything. We can't even go jogging outside.
Well, I think you have to be realistic with children and explain to them what
Mhm.
the social reality is that is not their has nothing to do with their abilities and their capabilities, and that you're going to the best of your ability protect them as much as you can, and you're going to surround your children with other children and other families that can offer support systems to them with the full understanding that there is a world out there that is hostile to them. But what's important is that African people have to advocate. We have to advocate for ourselves, for our children. We have to stop just re-electing people because they're Black. We have to stop just accepting whatever is thrown to us. And well, I might lose my job. Well, you also might lose your life if you don't. And so it's a trade-off. It's important to not sugarcoat things for our children. Our children have to grow up understanding the reality in which they find themselves and what racism and bigotry does, and how it could impact upon them, so that they can have a cushion and be prepared. Resilience is the factor, and you get resilience and you're able as an adult to maintain resilience when you've had a childhood that has been nurturing, even under adverse conditions. If the child knows that the parent loves them and will protect
Mhm.
them to the best of their ability, that does wonders. That sends a lot of messages that are insulatory, that insulate, that offer the ability to bounce back. To the degree that a person can't bounce back and rigid is to the degree that they have had a lot of events where they were not protected emotionally, and so they become rigid, and that rigidity is how they maintain their ability to survive. Unfortunately, that can only last within a little sphere of that little world
Yeah.
that they've created. Yeah. Hmm.
Mm.
And that's the same thing when you go into relationships. You go into relationships, and your partner is this way and that way, and of course you make whatever adjustments you can. But if you see that that partner is really, really not functioning well, and
Mhm.
you know it in your gut, you either offer them the opportunity to get some help, or you get the hell out.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. Yeah. But I think that sometimes, like you said, you're in a relationship, you have a child, you're trying to like make it work, and you want to make it work. But at the end of the day, if they're toxic and if they may hurt you or whatever, you have to leave.
It's
Yeah.
not working. So
Yeah.
you can't make it work. And you made the operative word. You said try. And every time you hear the word try, you know it's never going to happen.
Mm.
Because trying is one of those words, as people who've heard me before who may be listening, it's one of those PZ words. It's a mental masturbatory word. It feels good, but it ain't the real thing because it doesn't cross the right brain to the left brain for you to do anything of an action. That word only exists in English, by the way. It doesn't exist. So phylogenetically in your brain, that word is not even present. So it doesn't register for you to take an action. You either do something or you don't. You either will or you won't. You either did or you didn't. If you're trying and you're talking to me as a behaviorist, I know you're bullshitting. Can I say that? Okay.
You did.
Okay, well, too late.
Yeah, you know what I was going to say is either you piss or get off the pot. You know,
that's what my grandmother used to say. Yes, you either do or get off the pot.
Yep. Yeah, my grandmother. My grandmother still says that she's 96 years old and she's still, she's still saying it. So okay, so just getting back to these relationships,
right?
How can we start to like work together? I mean, how can we have like healthy relationships?
We got to first want to have healthy relationships. We have to not want to be getting over on people. We have to want to be developing good, positive relationships, not just to get over, but to accentuate our lives. And to the degree that we can do that, then that will be the basis of positive relationships. But if you out there trying to, get over, then, it's not going to happen. Like I said, we got to be kinder, gentler, and honest with each other and stop playing games. We're in a war, people. This is no time to play games. Either we're going to come together and build a life, or we're going to go apart and build a life. But we got to build a life no matter what.
Yeah. What do you, okay, so you know how a lot of, I don't know if this is accurate research. I hear a lot of people talking about, there's no men left out there. There's no men, there's no men. And so
there are men out there. There are men out there. Many women are not willing to look for men who they might deem inappropriate. There are a lot of good men out there. There are some, dogs, true. But there are also some women that are shaky too. So there are good men. It's just that you have to use your radar. You have to have criteria. And if you don't, and criteria can't just be about the things that man can buy you. It can also has to be about how they treat you as a human being, what kind of self-respect they have for themselves so that they can have it for you. And so the reality of it is develop some criteria, people, ladies, develop some criteria, men, and not just, a booty call, develop the criteria that's going to be lasting, that's going to accentuate your life, that's going to be complementary, as we went into before, in terms of the African principles. And so to the degree that you can develop that criteria and bounce it off back and forth, and don't be just looking at somebody because they got a fine car, they looking good, or whatever your criteria for looking good is. Look at their values, look at their how they treat the people in their lives. If they have children and have been divorced, look at how they're still, the relationship that they still have with those children or with those other women or men, and know what you're dealing with. And if your gut tells you that something is wrong with this relationship, before you get yourself too heavily involved, roll out.
Roll out. That's right.
Roll out.
Roll
and
out.
survive, because otherwise, if you don't do that, you're going to end up with years of misery, headache, financial ruin, all the things that we know about.
Yeah. Can do you believe that relationships together have together a divine purpose?
Yes, I do. First of all, the divinity is created in the union. And in the union, that brings forth another life. And whether it brings forth another life in a person, it can bring forth another life in generation of ideas and generation of values and systems that help a community. You have a balance of masculine and feminine energy, and particularly in our community, that's a hard thing to block. If you got a strong, powerful Black man and woman working together, it's hard to break that down. Hard to break it down. And so we have to stop letting all these other people come into our bedrooms and break us
Oh,
down.
yes, yes, yes. So, God, this is so many questions. All right.
Well, we have to do this again. We'll have to do
Yes,
this again. Yeah.
yes. So that what do you think about and I just thought about this as you were talking and you were saying people breaking up, the union. So, what do you think about this whole polygamy, thing? Do you think that's something that we should be looking at as a way to be
If we
okay?
can't afford, if you can't afford to take care of yourself, how can you afford to take
Mhm,
care of somebody, two or three somebody else? Polygamy was designed as a social construct
mhm,
when in a situation where there were women who needed to be taken care of, and the man could afford it. You got to have a lot of money to be polygamous. And while people do have these relationships and some of them survive, uh, I I've treated people in polygamous relationships. There's still a
mhm,
lot of jealousy. Don't let them fool you. There's a lot of backbiting and stuff that goes on in those relationships. Part of the issue has to do is that we're bringing a Western mentality into a more indigenous and African system, and even that doesn't always work. And so polygamy, if it's in the context of a social dynamic to pool economic resources, but if it's in the context of having more than one wife and you're sleeping with more than one woman and all of that, it takes an adjustment to deal with that,
mhm,
because invariably there is not equality in those relationships.
mhm. Hmm. Do you see it like more so like do you treat like women that have like lots of men or like lots of men husbands and or do you treat it the other way around with like you know
Well, they don't have lots of husbands, but they may have more than one man.
mm, okay.
I've treated both. You
Oh, okay.
name it, you name it, I've treated it. But there tends to be more men with other women. But let me tell you, the sisters are not too far behind.
Mm,
They are
wow.
not far behind.
Wow. All right. So okay, wait, I got some more questions here for you. Um
Okay.
So, in terms of going back to, you had said something. You were talking about some of the disorders that we're seeing a lot of. So, there's one that kind of I keep hearing a lot about is this anxiety disorder, and we're seeing it a lot, like with kids and with adults. Like, what are some things that you can do to help with that disorder? Like, just to so that you just be okay. Like, what are some things you can do?
Well, we got to look at the cause of the anxiety disorder.
Oh,
Sometimes the cause may be a medical reason. Sometimes, if you have hypoglycemia, low blood sugar, you can have an anxiety symptom. If you can have thyroid disease, and you can have anxiety symptoms. So we got to first rule out if there is a medical underlying physical reason for that anxiety.
okay.
Secondly, we have to go back and look at the coping styles within the family, because it's been my experience that many anxiety disorders are learned behavior. They've
Mm,
been learned because that's how the family operates, you
mm,
know. And number three, there are some issues where these children and adults are manifesting anxiety because it's a substitute for having been traumatized. And it's a more socially acceptable way to deal with what has happened to them than some of the other areas. Yeah.
okay. Um, so going back to your rollout, I know we keep going back, we're going all around, but when you were like you just have to roll out. Okay, so how does one like recover from after you rolled out?
Well, first of all, that goes back to the whole issue of self love. If you love yourself and you see something is toxic, there is no need to recover. You know that I did this to save my life. You got to be real about it, and not have any regrets, other than
Mhm.
the fact that, I have these memories and all of that, and we tend to shadow over these things. So if you, however, gave all you could, did not know initially that the relationship was going to be toxic, and then you realized that you were in a difficult situation, and you decided for your own sanity, or they decided for their sanity, that that you need to go your separate ways, then you work out, if you can, amicably. If you cannot, if you're married legally, then the lawyers will work it out for you. But
Yeah,
but the reality of it is that you have to come to the realization that if somebody does not love you, or you no longer love somebody, and you neither one of you are willing to work at it because you think it's fruitless, then you have to accept that reality as a mature adult and not be somewhere where you're not wanted.
Yeah. So if you grew up and you didn't have like an ideal, or you didn't see, Black love, where do like how do we find it? Like if you've never seen it, then how do
Right.
you find it?
Well, I think that's why going back and working with African roots and African history, and these study
Mm,
groups and things that are in almost all the major cities, will help you begin to look at what examples are of what is healthy relationships. And if you
mm,
cannot find that dynamic, of course, that, like I said earlier, there's counseling services, and there's many people in your social circles who have positive relationships, well, some, and use them to validate, and then you can then create for yourself what it is ideally that I want in a relationship, and go out here and get it. But usually there's lots of examples of positive dynamics, and even positive dynamics that divorced, and you can still see healthy dynamics in
yeah.
those relationships. So even if you didn't have that scripting, you have intellect, and the intellect will lead you in
Hmm.
directions that your gut will feel satisfied with.
Mm, I like that. Um, is there okay, so I'm gonna try to say this the politically correct way. In terms of when people go outside their race to find a mate or to be with or whatever, is that a mental disorder?
No, it's not a mental disorder.
Okay.
It may be socially something that we don't like, but
Hmm.
it's not necessarily a mental disorder. Now, if they only exclusively date outside
Hmm.
of their race, then we got problems.
Okay.
But a lot of people are going outside. I have a colleague who is married to a European, and I asked her, she's a very bright woman, and I asked her one day why it was that she selected this white man for her husband. And she said something very interesting. She said, I was in an environment where all the black men were dating white women, and no one would ever take me out. And the only person that ever asked me out was this white man. And he was a nice guy. We ended up having a relationship, and I got married. So sometimes people are in situations where they choose to not be alone. And if they choose to not be alone, it's whoever is there or convenient. But I find that in many instances, people are not working at finding a person of their same ethnicity, or maybe they've been hurt by someone of the same, ethnicity. Love, is a, like I say, is a form of insanity, and so wherever you get it from, you get it.
Mhm.
But if that person is so antagonistic to your value systems and your culture, then you're going to have a problem, especially when it comes to raising children. I wouldn't call it mental illness.
Mhm.
I would call it a social disorder.
Mm. Mm. Wow. Got another book to write, Dr. Newton.
But I mean, people find love wherever they find love, and many people who look white are not white.
Yeah,
Let me
that's
just say that.
um okay. We're gonna take some questions in about 5 minutes. So if you have any questions, feel free to type them in. And so we'll, make sure we get Dr. Newton to answer them. Um, just going back to this ideal of black love, and um, is it something like, just in your professional opinion, do you think it's like, where do you think we are on the spectrum of achieving it? You know, just globally, like 10 being like,
There are many examples of Black love that are successful. Um, I think people have to be willing to work at it. I
mm,
think what has happened in more recent times is people want everything instant in terms of gratification. They, first of all, didn't have any selection criteria. So if you got selection criteria, you know what you want. Secondly, some people were just lonely and took whatever was available.
mm,
Thirdly, some people felt like they were getting old and they didn't want to be by themselves.
mm,
So there are examples of successful Black love. We need to cultivate, first of all, friendships that are positive. And from those friendships can grow love. Everything else is lust. And so, you know, the way we approach it is we have to train our children to make sure that they understand the value of the other human being, the value of a relationship, and what you want to get out of that relationship. If all you want is a wham bam, thank you, ma'am, you can get that anywhere. And so, so don't be looking for love in all the wrong places.
yeah,
And if you want to have genuine relationship, you first of all have to have a friendship.
yeah,
Love, true love comes from first the love of yourself, the nature of a relationship and friendship and love at a platonic level with somebody else. And then, and only then, can you achieve the other kind of love that has eroticism as well as friendship in it. Because other than that, you're not going to be satisfied. And you
mhm,
have to understand that people change. And you're not perfect, they're not perfect. And if you're working together toward a common goal, you recognize that it won't always be easy. You're not going to always agree. And so, what you will do is work through those things. Communication is critical. If you can't talk to the person, I don't know how you can sustain the relationship.
yeah,
And
yeah,
having common goals and having a common direction and having some commonality in how you want to raise these children is critical.
yeah. Yeah, these are all kinds of conversations that you need to have prior to,
Absolutely, prior. You better
yeah.
have them prior.
Yeah, well, the other thing you said about, the change thing, I don't think people realize, they that things are going to change.
Yeah, they're
Yeah,
going to change.
yeah. Do you feel like, or do you think that there's a difference between how men and women are, like what they're looking for? Like, are
Yeah,
like,
I think there's some differences and some similarities.
okay,
Initially, it's about physical attraction for both, I think, men and women. But women tend to want security. That's a major thing you hear them say. Security for them means a stable job, paying the bills, that kind of
mhm,
thing. Um, and they want somebody to talk to. Men want somebody, first of all, that is physically appealing to them, but they
mhm,
also want somebody, if they're positive men, if they're men who are self confident, they want somebody who they can talk to, who they can have dialogue with, who
mhm,
can be a partner to them, to share things with them, to allow them to express their feelings and have it be okay. You'll find that a lot of men, people will say, "Oh, how did he get with her? She's this and she's that." But that particular person, wasn't just all about sex. You know, it was about that person being compatible with them,
mhm.
listening to them, sharing with them, willing to build a life with them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Wow. Okay. We have a couple of questions that we want to,
Okay.
if you can answer. Well, I know you can answer them. So, from Miss Natasha Love, she has a couple of questions. One is, how do we support interracial couples with kids?
How do we support it? What does she mean by that? I don't know what she means by that. How does she support them? What does
Um,
she mean?
I don't know, but she's
Ask
gonna,
her to type it back
explain.
in and tell us what
Yeah.
she means by support. The support means uh, what does she mean? Accept them or I, I I just need to know what she exactly means by support. I
Okay.
don't know what that means.
Okay. All right. We're gonna come back to her.
Sure.
Okay. Curtis Taylor, your friend, he wants to know. Yeah, we got.
Hey, Curtis. Hey, Curtis.
Yeah, we actually kind of talked about this because he wanted to know, what is a healthy relationship, and you've touched on that a lot. So let's see. What about? Can you speak on the complex P post-traumatic disorder, or is it?
PTSD?
It's PSTD.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's a cluster of symptoms that occur after somebody has had an extreme trauma or they've witnessed somebody else having an extreme trauma. By
Mhm.
extreme trauma, that's something outside the ordinary, something that is not in everyday life. It can be, like 9/11. It can be like having been abused as a child. It could be seeing somebody murdered. And so there are a cluster of symptoms that include sleep disorders, that include startle responses where people overreact to
Okay.
different kinds of situations, that include anxiety, where people can get overstimulated easy. They can have flashbacks if they've been in the military, and even if they've been traumatized within a community, where they relive the experience all over again. And they can have physical symptoms. They can have cardiac palpitations, shortness of breath,
Mm,
gastrointestinal problems. They can have all that.
yeah. So, okay. So Natasha, she kind of got back to us. She,
Good.
yeah. So she wanted to know, like, in terms of therapy, with kids that are products of interracial relationships.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
What we find with these children is there are a lot of issues because many of them are not clear which side they belong to, where their
Mhm.
loyalties are. And I tell them their loyalties are to the world because, first of all, we have to accept the fact that white people came from black people. Let's talk about
Wait,
the
wait, wait, wait.
biology.
Yeah, we got to
Let's
say that
get
one
to
more
the
time.
biology of the reality.
Yeah.
And they were socialized into being something else other than what they were. And
Yeah.
so, what I have found is that teaching these children the history of both sides of their family has been very helpful. And at the same time, having that child know that if they have one parent that's black and they look black, that they're going to be treated differently. And the reality is how you teach them and defend to defend against the trauma. And that parent, I've had lots of interracial couples, and I've had to bring, the mothers and the fathers in. I
Mm.
have more white women with black men, but I've also had it both ways. And it's interesting that the resistance comes more from my African American partners than it does from my European partners. And that, the European partners. And that may be just historically because they have a sense of who they are and more freedom initially. But what I found is that once you have these open and frank discussions and they realize some of the stereotypes and language that they use that may be offensive to the other partner, if they love each other, they will change. If they don't love each other, then it's going to be the same old, same old. And the children have to then be protected and cushioned. And I have friends who are in the UK who are mixed race.
Mhm.
And one of the things that's interesting about that is those who embrace their Africanity tend to be healthier than those who do
Mm.
not,
Wow.
emotionally healthier.
Yeah. Um. Wow.
Yeah, that's a heavy piece.
Yeah. That's yeah.
And it's a more complex answer than what I just gave, but at the same time, that's a simplistic way of addressing it.
Wow. Okay. It's a statement from Dion, and it's a question as well. Young Black women seem to be leading the way in self acceptance through embracing body positivity and celebrating their sexuality. What can older Black women take away from that?
They can take away from that the lessons that the young people are demonstrating, that you are worth something, you are of value, and that it's not just all about what you look like. It's about who you are and what you generate and what you demonstrate. And so whatever negativity that you may have about yourself, that's learned behavior, and you can unlearn it. And the only way you can get rid of one bad habit is to substitute it with a good one. And so
Mhm.
take some lessons from some of the younger women and realize that you have value. And just because you're older and maybe you've grown up not appreciating who you are, that doesn't mean you cannot change, and that you must value everything. God put you here, the Creator put you here to be a manifestation of divinity. And so get on out there and be divine, sis.
Yes, yes, yes. Yes. You know what? I'm walking with divine purpose, and that's a game. I mean, that is straight a game changer right there. Um,
Yeah, you are.
oh,
And that's why, and that's how you have to address it when you're dealing with your menfolk. You
mm,
know, you're dealing with divinity here, and I'm supposed to be dealing with divinity. So let's come on and manifest this gloriousness.
yes, yes. You know, that is to me. That is just that's beautiful. If I'm looking at you as your king, and you're looking at me as queen, like that's it. Like we can go so much further. You know,
That's
in
right. That's
dynamic.
right.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah. And then the help. Oh, yes, yes. Um, okay. That's, I mean, you know what? I'm looking at everyone is like, yes, yes. I mean, say it one more time. That's like the comments are just blowing up over here. Um, I wanted to just thank you, you know, for because I understand you are one busy woman. Okay, you like to keep calling yourself an old woman, but I don't know about all that. I think yeah, because you are one woman that is busy. Um,
Well, there's no grass growing under these feet. That's for sure. No question about that.
That's great. And you have to when your book comes out, you got to come back because
It'll
everyone
be out next month. It'll be out next month, and I will make sure that we come back and discuss it, because it's distressing yourself and freeing your mind in 16 achievable steps.
oh yes, yes.
It's
See,
called Smart Sisters and Brothers Ain't Finishing Last. Distress yourself and free your mind in 16 achievable steps. And we actually have case histories with some of the things that we discussed here from actual patients that I have treated.
okay.
And
Oh,
at the end we give practical examples in each chapter of these 16 steps. And the first step, and I want to say that, is accepting your own divinity.
your divine
That's
purpose.
the first step.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
Um, so before we go, I want to first just thank you so much for coming on the show.
Well,
And I,
thank you for having me. I know we had a difficult time getting this together.
yeah, but you know what? Listen, if I had to get
Trying
on
to
the
catch me.
train, no. If I had to get on the train, I told Taki this morning, if I had to get on the train and come on down to Baltimore, I was coming because I so want to have this conversation with you. And I just feel, I
Thank you.
really feel so honored to be sitting here with you. You're a powerful
Well,
woman.
I'm honored that you feel that way and that you wanted me to do this. This is
Yeah,
great.
yeah. And so we have a treat for everybody. But before we get to the treat, I'm gonna give my shout outs because after the treat, then we're just gonna we'll be off the air. But I first want to thank everybody for helping us put this together. The whole HAPI team, Tahuti Films, Taki, Elena, Dion, Tammy, Charles, Rock, Daryl, King Simon, all you guys, thank you so much. Everybody, you know, that's been commenting, thank you so much. I saw shout out to Regina Fleming, Natasha Love, Curtis Taylor. I saw Aaron Green on here earlier.
Oh, Aaron. Oh,
Yeah,
great. Great.
yeah. Lady Harden, which is my sister-in-law, she's coming along. That's what's up. So this is great. Um, and Team Success. So you
And
got
I want to thank them too, because I was a hard person to catch up with, and Brother Taki just kept going and going. He wouldn't let me off the hook, so I got to give him a shout out for
yeah,
that.
yes. That let me tell you That is one determined brother right there.
Hey, that's what you
Yes,
got to do.
you got it. Yes, yes. Um, all right, guys. So this is something very special. The first time I actually saw this was I was looking on YouTube and I was looking at some videos of Dr. Newton, and I noticed that she started off a couple of her seminars or her webinars or whatever with this poem that she wrote. So this is my gift to you guys. Enjoy, and thank you so much, Dr. Newton.
Okay, well, let me give a little background for this before I start this poem. It is in the book Post Traumatic Slavery Disorder, and I was in Senegal New Year's Eve of year 2000,
Mhm.
and we were had a tour group because I do tours to Africa, and we went over to the slave house on Goree Island, and Mr. Joe, who's now transitioned to an ancestor, was not able to do our tour because some diplomats from France had come, blah blah blah. So I said, well, I don't want to have my tour done unless Mr. Joe does it. And so he said, well, we'll call you back. So they called us back. It was New Year's Eve. They called us back around 6 o'clock. So we took the last ferry over to Dakar, and we were going to end up taking the last ferry, over to Goree, and we would end up taking the last ferry back. So this was the first time I had been in the slave house at night. And it was eerie because I had been there many times, but it was very eerie. And so while the group was doing the tour, talk about anxiety, I started to have a panic attack. And
Mm,
can you imagine a psychiatrist getting ready to have a panic attack with 20 or 30 people on a tour? So I just walked outside and said, I'm not going to be in here because I can't afford to lose my cool in
mm,
front of my tour group. So I went out on the dock and I just started to meditate. And when I started to meditate on the dock, this was written on New Year's Eve of uh, right before, we turned the turn of the century. And it goes like this. It's called I Wonder. I wonder, I really, really wonder. I wonder how it came to be that African gods and goddesses and kings and queens and everyday folks like we were stolen and taken across the sea to faraway and distant places, beaten and chained in God-forsaken spaces, raped and castrated without any traces by those with strange names, and whose alien faces can still be found today amongst all the races. I wonder how it came to be that African gods and goddesses and kings and queens and everyday folks like we could have two eyes but still not see. The pain and misery of days gone by, still casting its spell and weaving its web and telling its lie in the hearts and minds and souls of those of us who lost our names. But we did not die. Mercy, oh mercy, above the ocean's roar. Don't you hear the ancestors cry? I wonder how it came to be that African gods and goddesses and kings and queens and everyday folks like we could still bow our heads on bended knee and ask for forgiveness of their great sins while the guilty ones continue to grin and make new slave ships to put us in by age, by sex, by religion and color of skin, creating new deaths from without and within. Oh Lord, my God, when will it end? I wonder how it came to be that African gods and goddesses and kings and queens and everyday folks like we could dance and shout with such delight and glee while you walk that walk and talk that talk, just like the man you see. But should a sister or a brother stumble and fall, won't stop long enough to have a helping hand at all, turning a deaf ear to every cry. Come on, y'all, let's have a party. Let's go get high. Start some new world wars. Throw a few games of ball. Mercy. Oh, mercy. Above the ocean's roar, don't you hear the ancestors call? I wonder how it came to be that African gods and goddesses and kings and queens and everyday folks like we could take from scratch and make every imaginable recipe and be the best at whatever we see. But through all this death, destruction, and debauchery, we still don't know yet quite how to be free. I wonder, I really, really wonder. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
You're welcome.